Good evening, Mary Gearan with ABC News. The whole of Greater Melbourne is heading back into lockdown. Just 8 weeks since rules were eased, 5 million people are returning to stage 3 restrictions from midnight tomorrow. The stay-at-home orders will affect all 31 council areas that make up metropolitan Melbourne, as well as Mitchell Shire to the north. School holidays have been extended by a week for all students in those areas, except for Year 11 and 12 and special needs students who'll return to classrooms on Monday. Victoria has recorded 191 new coronavirus cases today. There are now 772 active cases in the state, and there's a big increase in the number of people in hospital. 9 people are now in intensive care. State political reporter Bridget Rollison begins our coverage.
It's the announcement no one wanted to hear.
The public health team have advised me to reimpose stage 3 stay-at-home restrictions.
But after Victoria recorded another 191 cases, Daniel Andrews says there was no choice.
There is simply no alternative other than thousands and thousands of cases and potentially more, many people in hospital, and the inevitable tragedy that will come from that.
The new 6-week lockdown means in the ring-fence regions there are only 4 reasons to leave your home: food and essentials, exercise, medical and caregiving reasons, and work or study. But there are a few changes from last time. No visitors except your partner are allowed to come to your home, and outdoor gatherings are limited to 2 people, except for your immediate household. Funerals are back to 10 people only, and 5 for weddings. When it comes to exercise, golf and fishing are allowed this time, but you aren't allowed to leave your local area for it.
This is, I know, further than we went last time.
Of today's cases, another 13 are inside Melbourne's locked down public housing towers, bringing the total to 69. The government is hoping to test all residents by next week. Then those in the hardest lockdown will be on the same restrictions as the rest of Melbourne.
There is a unanimous view that this is required to avoid absolutely catastrophic outcomes.
There are now 9 infections linked to the Northern Hospital at Epping, including 8 staff. And last night, ambulances were told to bypass the emergency department unless time critical. The massive Tarkwa College outbreak at Truganina in Melbourne's west now sits at 90. Across Greater Melbourne, school holidays will be extended for a week, except for students doing their VCE. They'll go back to class on Monday.
I think it's absolutely manageable.
The lockdown means businesses like gyms and entertainment centres that recently opened will have to close again. Restaurants, pubs and cafes must return to takeaway only.
I think there's going to be a lot that don't survive at all, and that's the black area.
Daniel Andrews let the COVID genie out of the bottle with hotel quarantine bungles, and now everyone's paying the price for it.
Victoria has 773 active cases, and most of them are in Melbourne's northwest corridor. Hume has 145 and Wyndham in the west 105 cases.
I think a sense of complacency has crept into us as we let our frustrations get the better of us. I think that each of us knows someone who has not been following the rules as well as they should have.
Yeah, 6 weeks is really long. So yeah, not feeling that good about it.
If that's what we've got to do, that's what we've got to do.
Definitely makes sense. You know, the community transmission has been on the rise.
The Premier says the lockdown will give Melbourne an opportunity to reset, and the full 6 weeks are needed to stop the virus spiralling out of control. While he concedes the decision will cause serious economic damage, his priority is saving lives. But the challenge is getting Victorians to listen. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
And state political reporter Richard William joins us now. Rich, there have been calls for the Premier to take some responsibility for the worsening situation. Did he do that today?
Well, Mary, I think it's something that lots of Victorians who are feeling a bit of despair tonight want answered. They're conscious that this, of course, is a very serious development today, and they're worried about the surge in cases, but they also want answers, particularly about the social and economic impact that's going to happen. Now, Premier Daniel Andrews today made it pretty clear that he thought complacency in the community was the major problem, that people weren't obeying the rules and their frustrations got in the way, and they'd gathered in large groups, which has allowed this virus to spread. But on the other matter, which is the jumping of the virus from hotel quarantine through security guards into the community, he was, I guess, less sort of assertive. He was asked today whether he'd accept any responsibility for this. He was even asked if he'd say sorry to all Victorians.
I am very sorry that we find ourselves in this position. I would just, with the greatest of respect, put it to you though, that getting this virus and dying from it is very onerous too. Like, this is challenging. I get it. I know that. I understand that. I didn't want to be in this position. No Victorian does. But let's not see this as simply an inconvenience. It's much more than that. It's a pandemic, and it will kill thousands of people if it gets completely away from us.
The Premier speaking today. And Rich, can you give us any more details about what's happening with schools and school holidays across Greater Melbourne and Mitchell Shire?
So as of next week, there will be an extra week of school holidays for everyone except for Year 11 and 12 students, as well as special needs schools. They will be returning to the classroom next week as planned. Now, for all those other students, they'll have that extra week of holidays to give teachers time to prepare for the possibility of the return to remote learning for some weeks during the 6-week lockdown. Now, the government is saying that if any parents who are essential workers and need their children to be looked after during this extra week of holidays, they can send their children to school, and there will be some teachers on site who will be running holiday programs so they continue to do their jobs. But just stressing that the government is preparing for a possible return to remote learning in this lockdown. Mary?
Richard Willingham, thank you. Well, emotions have been running high outside the Flemington public housing estate that remains under a hard lockdown. Police arrested 4 protesters today and charged them with breaching the Chief Health Officer's directions. At this stage, it's not clear exactly how long the public housing towers in Melbourne's inner west will stay under the state's toughest restrictions.
Better delayed than never. On the 3rd full day of hard lockdown, firefighters moved in to make sure no residents were going hungry.
At least they start to listen to our concern slowly, day by day.
Deliveries like this have made passing the time a little easier for the 3,000 people trapped in their flats across the 9 towers at Flemington and North Melbourne. Community groups are pumping out meals to help feed the residents.
It's been tough, trying to source enough food, trying to scale up quickly, but we're doing it. The first food was delivered yesterday.
But tensions are still running high at Flemington. Residents were initially told their detention would be for at least 5 days. But the Premier says restrictions won't be eased until everyone has been tested for the virus, and many are still waiting.
By the look of it, 5 days isn't going to be enough. We're going to stay here longer.
Public housing tenants at other Melbourne estates fear it's only a matter of time before coronavirus spreads through their high-rises. They feel neglected by the state government and say they're lacking the basics to protect themselves. There's only one hand sanitiser in the foyer of each tower, according to residents at the Carlton, Richmond and South Melbourne estates.
We asked for more, but we're only given one small, and that's often empty.
No masks have been supplied, which I think is a tragedy. I think all public housing residents should definitely be sent them.
With just a single cleaner for each tower's communal areas and hundreds of people using the same lifts, residents say better sanitation is urgently needed.
This health crisis has exposed a longer-term housing crisis.
We're a rich enough country to provide adequate social housing to all, and why aren't we? And what I'd love to see is Albanese and Morrison coming together with bipartisanship.
James Hancock, ABC News, Melbourne.
In just a few hours from midnight, Victorians will be shut out from New South Wales. Police and defence personnel will monitor the border crossings as local residents try to plan for a new way of life amid a lot of uncertainty.
2 cities, 2 states. But to those in Albury-Wodonga, this is one community, a community that'll soon be split.
I think we are going to experience some pretty big challenges from tonight.
As the deadline to the border closure ticked down, those on the front line stocked up.
Lots of flour. Everyone's always buying flour, sourdough starters and starter cultures.
There were long lines at Service New South Wales too, but they didn't get what they came for. These residents were told to apply online to cross between cities.
I'm trying to get a permit so I can cross back into the border and work.
Centrelink, medical appointments over here.
Police have promised discretion in the first few days.
If you lived within the border bubble, if we call it that, then it will certainly be much easier to pass back and forth. If you live outside of that, you will have to apply for the exemption.
Hopefully by the end of week one, we've got a system where, and this is the way I would see it, you'd have coloured permits in your windscreen and you are waved through.
Further along the Murray, tourism operators are adjusting to yet another shifting landscape. The river is the border.
As you step onto one of our gangways, for example, and onto the boat, you're in New South Wales. So effectively, we're going in there, if you like, but we're not leaving anybody over there. We're coming back into Victoria.
This is the Rich River Golf Course in Moama, New South Wales, but many of its members are Victorians.
And unfortunately, we're really paying the price for a problem that is, 250 or 300 kilometres away, down in Melbourne.
That problem has spread. 2 probable COVID cases were detected in Albury late yesterday. That's caused a rush of residents wanting to get tested. A pop-up clinic has been set up here in Albury's north. It's been booked out all day. About 100 swabs have been taken. Those fleeing Victoria are glad to be home.
A bit of relief. Happy that I'm out of there, to be honest. Happy I can come home.
I was in rural Victoria, but yeah, I'm glad to be out. Just got out in time.
Relief as well among passengers on the last interstate train out of Melbourne.
I was just scared of getting COVID, so but I did take precautions and stuff.
No one knows when the next service will pull into station. Jessie Dorset, ABC News.
And our reporter Ashley Aldridge is at the Lincoln Causeway in Albury and joins us now. Ashley, how are people feeling there tonight?
I think it's fair to say that there is a real feeling of confusion tonight. When we spoke with local residents earlier this morning, they did appear to be adjusting to the idea that the border would in fact close, but then came the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews' announcement later this afternoon that those hotspots in Melbourne would be placed back into lockdown and stage 3 restrictions would be reimposed there. Since then, residents here now wonder why we are being impacted hundreds of kilometres away. They say that if people in those hotspots can no longer travel here, that they don't understand why we cannot travel across into New South Wales. There's only less than 5 hours until those closures do come into play, and the other concern is how it's actually going to work. We're yet to speak to anyone that has been able to obtain a permit which will allow them to cross the state lines from midnight. That includes ourselves. I live over the border in Wodonga in Victoria, and we're scheduled to do a cross with News Breakfast tomorrow morning. So we face travelling to those checkpoints, and we will have to try and get through without a permit. But we are being reassured by New South Wales Police that authorities, which include the military, which we expect to arrive here later on tonight, that they will be what has been described as reasonable during the first 72 hours of this lockdown.
Ashley Aldridge will get home safely. We'll see you wherever you are tomorrow morning. Thank you. Well, that border closes in less than 5 hours and the website to issue permits is still being built. Josh Bavis takes a look at how the process should work and who should be able to get one.
Closing the busiest border in the country isn't going to be easy.
The last thing you'd want to see is the 2 largest states have to shut down their activity, and that's a risk that was posed to New South Wales had we not taken this action.
There are close to 55 ground crossings, including the Hume and Princess highways. The Hume alone typically has about 10,000 vehicles crossing every day. About 1,000 defence personnel and police will be deployed, making sure everyone coming into New South Wales is checked. Even drones will be used to make sure no one crosses illegally by foot. While it may be disruptive, there will be exemptions if you need to get across.
There will be queues, there will be frustration, there will be lots of questions, but we're doing this to keep everybody safe.
People will still be allowed to travel across the border, but only for certain reasons and with a permit. Exemptions will be made for those living in a border town, freight drivers, emergency services, fly-in, fly-out workers, or on compassionate grounds. All applications for permits will need to be made online at the Service New South Wales website. New South Wales residents can still travel to Victoria without an approved reason, but they'll need to apply for a permit to return and self-isolate for 2 weeks. Crossing the border without a permit could land you with a fine of $11,000 or jail time, with on-the-spot fines of $1,000 for lying on a form.
Police will have powers to demand details from people. We'll have the powers to turn people around at the border. We will have powers to issue a fine, or on-the-spot fine, or charge people.
All the major airlines are expected to significantly reduce their daily flight schedules between the two states. Josh Bavis, ABC News, Sydney.